Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am the Scared Sheep, and in this video we will be continuing the Japanese mockumentary series Housou Kinshi with episode 4. We're already halfway through the series now, so don't forget to go back and watch any episodes if you missed them. Each episode is standalone, and you can watch them in any order, but they do tend to get progressively harder to figure out the truth as the series goes on. In episode 4, called Scary Neighbor Trouble, we are introduced to the Morishitas, a family of 3 who has been having trouble with their elderly neighbor next door. A fairly common issue for many people, but of course, since this is supposedly banned broadcast footage, we know that what happens is going to be far from everyday occurrences. The clues in this episode are somewhat all over the place, so if you miss anything, don't worry, I'll be able to show you the truth at the end. Now let's jump into the episode and see if you can spot the truth. The episode begins with the mother of the Morishita family, Rikako, taking the camera crew to behind the house where garbage has been strewn about the yard. She says she cleans it up nearly every day, but there is always more garbage by the next day. She then takes us further into the corner of the yard and shows us her little garden where she had been growing herbs and vegetables. Nothing can grow there now, however, as it seems some sort of chemical or pesticide was sprinkled over it. The cameraman asks if she has any idea who could be doing this, to which she quietly answers that she suspects the woman who lives next door. When the camera turns its attention to the house, we can hear a recording of a kyogen being played very loudly from within. Kyogen is a form of traditional Japanese theater that developed alongside No. It acts as an intermission of sorts during a No play, and is a short story of its own that is performed between acts. This particular kyogen is called kamabara, which means sickle suicide. The story goes that once upon a time there was a very lazy husband named Taro and a very angry wife. After the wife finally convinces the husband to go and cut some wood for them, he sets off only to decide that he would rather kill himself than return home. Since he is just a simple peasant, he doesn't own a sword, so he decides that using his sickle is the best way to do it. Taro tries several times to kill himself, but fails due to his cowardice. His wife hears of his suicidal attempts and comes to him. After some back and forth, the wife grabs the sickle, and the story ends with her trying to kill him herself. Keep this tale in mind as we continue on with the story at hand. Outside their gate, Rikako shows us some crude, handmade signs that have been posted, saying things like die, cursed, God's punishment, devils, and poison, along with several just having the letter X scribbled on them. Moving on to dinner time, we are introduced to the Morishita family's only child, 8-year-old Genki. Genki loves insects, especially the praying mantis. When asked why, he says it's because sickles are really cool. Once again, we can hear the audio from Kamabara being played loudly from next door. At nearly midnight, we see the father of the family, Hitoshi, coming home from work. As a salesman in a trading company, he often leaves the house early in the morning and comes home late at night. While interviewing Hitoshi about the issue with the neighbor, we hear a crashing sound coming from the next room and a cry from Rikako. Rushing to see what was the matter, we find the dining room window has been broken, and Hitoshi heads outside to investigate, but finds nothing.
Yeah.
Afterwards, the cameraman sits down to interview the mother and father about when the trouble began. Rikako tells us that you, the neighbor, have been living there since before the family moved in 3 years ago. Initially, the two actually got along very well and would even go shopping together. But about a year ago, Yu's husband passed away from heart failure, after which she started looking and acting a bit odd. At one point, Rikako had been invited over for tea, but it seems Yu actually invited her over to talk about her strange religion, which made Rikako uncomfortable, so she left. After that, Yu's personality completely changed and the harassment began. Although Hitoshi doesn't really want to get involved, the Morishtas have tried to go to the police. However, they won't do anything without definitive proof, so Rikako wants a hidden security camera set up. With the security cameras in place, the crew and Rikako begin watching to see if they will catch anything on tape. After some wait, they spot Yu in her garden. In full view of the cameras, Yu starts dumping bags of garbage over their shared fence and into the Morishta's yard. The next day, we see her from the front entryway camera, ringing the doorbell to see if the family is home. When no one answers, Yu begins posting more of those handwritten signs on the fence. She then moves to the backyard, where we can see her pouring some sort of liquid all over the now dead vegetable garden. Lastly, we see Yu smoking a cigarette from her second-story window and promptly throwing the cigarette butt out into the Morishta's yard. However, it's what she does next that seems the most odd. While facing her neighbor's house, Yu begins drawing a large X in the air a few times. Why? The camera crew approaches Yu for an interview. And although she declines at first by spraying the staff with her hose, she later agrees and sits down to speak with the crew in what appears to be her altar room. The interview begins by asking what her reasoning is behind the behavior. She says that she believes the Morishita family to be cursed and that they are devils. She then brings up something that we did not know about before. It would seem that the husband, Hitoshi, had been having an affair with a woman from his office, and Rikako found out about it. Although the rumor in town is that Yu's husband died because he wanted to leave their strange religion, she insists that this so-called cursed family is to blame for her husband's death. Yu then turns to her altar and begins chanting a strange prayer of sorts. We see on the altar that a brown coffee mug has been placed next to a picture of her deceased husband, as he loved coffee and would spend a lot of time at his favorite cafe. The staff returns to the Morishita home to report what they have learned from Yu. Now that they have evidence against Yu, Hitoshi agrees to go talk to the police. Hearing this, Rikako asks to speak to him in private. She says she no longer wants him to bring this to the police, but rather she wants Hitoshi to speak to Yu directly. Apparently, she is afraid that if they go to the police, then the issue of his affair will come up, and it will look like the harassment is because of his affair, which upsets her greatly. A few days later, we sit down with the family for breakfast. Hitoshi mentions that today they will go over to speak with Yu in the hopes of settling things before taking the evidence to the police. When he comes downstairs for breakfast, Genki accidentally causes his dad to spill his coffee all down his pants and on his chair, so Rikako offers to make him a new one while he's upstairs getting changed. While his parents are next door, the camera crew interviews Genki as he draws in his sketchbook. He shows us his two praying mantises in an insect box on the table. At this point, his parents come home, and it sounds like the talk with Yu went rather well. A few minutes later, the father gets a phone call and heads outside to talk. Everything seems to be looking up for the family, but a month later, Rikako calls the staff, and they return to the Morishita home. Genki has suddenly become ill after eating some donuts that the family received from you. Rikuko is very upset and suspects that you did something to the donuts. Hitoshi says that she needs to calm down first, but this really just seems to upset her more. She accuses him of not caring whether his son dies or what happens to her because he has continued his affair even though it was supposed to have been finished. After a moment of heavy silence, Hitoshi drinks the last of his coffee and heads over to Yu's house to confront her.
すいません、森下だけどちょっと話あるんですけどね。呼びます。
ちょっと勝手にさないでよ。
ちょっと外で待っててもらえます？うちの息子に何したんですか？息子今痛い痛いってドーナツ食って痛い痛いって苦しんでますよ。答えてくださいよ。うちに何の恨みがあるんですか？ねえ。答えてください。呵責処女諸悪用勧誘無視人人心重心たら石橋衆一切苦行論願寺大山へ画釈諸行の無常案一心が起き大てやばいやばいかも。救急車だ救急車。
Hitoshi is rushed to the hospital. However, he passes away due to acute heart failure. The staff interviews the doctor who treated him, and he says that it could have been caused by diabetes, but since Hitoshi didn't have that, it was likely brought on by stress, which is quite common. When asked about the possibility of poison, the doctor says that it could not have been the case. 3 weeks later, the camera crew is invited to visit Rikuko and Genki in their new home. They ask if she believes that a curse is capable of killing people, to which she responds she isn't sure. She says that all she can focus on right now is trying to do her best for her and her son. At this point, Genki comes home from school and shows us his remaining mantis. He tells us that he only has the one now because the big one ate the small one. Rikako calls to her son, and Genki goes to talk with her, leaving us with the image of an X on the windowsill that looks identical to the one that you had on our altar. Once again, we hear that now familiar Kyogen telling us the story of useless Taro and his angry wife. We are also shown a variety of images, including various X's, a couple caught on camera in the dark, Yu's deceased husband's photo and mug, and Hitoshi's final moment. Okay, guys, now that we've seen the footage, can you figure out the true story behind it all? Simply put, this is a story about a husband earning his wife's ire. Thinking about the Kyogen, which was our first sort of clue, we can draw some parallels between Taro in the play and the father of this story, Hitoshi. Both are seen by their wives as being useless, and therefore better off dead. Taro for his laziness, and Hitoshi for his affair. This story actually begins over a year ago when the neighbor Yu decides to poison her husband for wanting to leave the cult that they belong to. After which, Yu tries to introduce her neighbor and friend Rikako to the cult in hopes of recruiting her. At first, Rikako is creeped out by the cult, and this is when the trouble with the neighbor begins. It's safe to assume that it's during this time of neighborly conflict, but before the camera crew began filming, that Rikako finds out that the affair that her husband was supposed to have ended is still ongoing. We also get to see some evidence of this, not only when Hitoshi begins taking calls on his cell outside, but even catching the two on camera sharing a goodbye kiss near the house. Rikako then seeks help from her former friend and neighbor, who is already aware of the husband's cheating. They create a plan to take care of Hitoshi, just as Yu had taken care of her husband. We see many clues throughout the episode of the two working together. To start, the scene where the window gets smashed off camera and Rikako claims was from something being thrown in the house was a clear setup done by Rikako herself. When Hitoshi goes outside, we see the glass shards lying on the outside of the windowsill. This would be impossible if something had been thrown from the outside in, and could only have been caused by something being thrown from the inside out. The other clue to this is that although Rikako claims something came in through the window, there is no object to be seen anywhere. The next clue is when Yu begins throwing trash into the yard, posting signs on their front gate, and poisoning Rikako's garden. We can clearly see all of the things that Rikako had been complaining about on the surveillance cameras. A little too clearly, if you ask me. Almost as if Yu knew that the cameras were there and where exactly they were focused. After the interview with Yu at her home, the next clue we see is the brown coffee mug that Hitoshi is using. Look familiar? That's because we got a nice close-up view of it on the altar at Yu's house. Looks like Rikako has decided to follow Yu's plan to a T. This is also why Rikako insists on making her husband another cup of coffee when Genki spills it. My only guess is that the poison must take a little while to build up to a lethal dose, and that's why the camera crew is called back to the Morishita home a month later. After giving Hitoshi nearly enough to cause a heart attack, Rikako, Yu, and Genki put the final part of the plan into motion. Yes, even Genki has been in on this plan from the beginning. We saw him drawing the X symbol of the cult in his sketchbook months ago. Yu gives the family donuts, and after Genki eats some, he pretends to have terrible stomach pains. Rikako lies that he also has a fever and tells Hitoshi that it must be because of the donuts from Yu. Finishing the last dosage of poison in his coffee, Hitoshi is guilted into going over to Yu's house to confront her. There, the poison takes effect and he has a heart attack. The most damning scene being his wife and son standing at the window, cursing him with the X sign as he dies. It's unclear as to what kind of poison is used, but it's safe to say that even if it could be detected, the secret is safe with this doctor, as we can see yet another X on this cult member's wall. In fact, we see a lot of X's throughout the show, from Yu's altar to the signs plastered on the front gate, to Genki's notebook, the doctor's office, and even reflected in the TV screen in Rikako and Genki's new home. It seems Rikako doesn't find the cult so creepy anymore. Lastly, we can make a few more comparisons between the show's storyline, Genki's interest in praying mantises, and the Kyogen. For one, there is a tie-in with the Kyogen and Genki's fascination with praying mantis, given his reason for liking them is because of their sickle-like arms. We also get some foreshadowing in the episode when we see the two initial praying mantises, and then only the larger one remaining. In the scene where Genki is drawing, we actually see the mantises mating, and in the mantis world, after mating, the larger female mantis will eat the smaller male. This is why only the bigger one is left at the end. Not too different from the characters in this episode. And that's that. What did you guys think of the 4th episode of Housou Kinshi? Even though the Kyogen isn't exactly necessary for figuring out the episode, I thought it was a really cool idea, and it does help put you in the right frame of mind for the episode if you're already familiar with the play. But let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe so you know when a new video goes up, and if you enjoyed this episode, then I'd be forever grateful if you hit that like button. It really helps out my channel and lets me know you guys are enjoying my work. Thank you so much to everyone for all of your support, and I'll see you in the next one.